Top 10 of Anything presents My Top 10 Movies. Season 1 of a new miniseries where each guest builds their top 10 movie list and defends every pick. It's the ultimate movie challenge, just 10 films to define your taste, your memories, your life. I'm Pav, and together with our guest, we'll relive classics, uncover hidden gems, and maybe even stir up some debate. Let's get into it. Hello everyone, this is Season 2, Episode 1 of our little side pod that we're doing. And joining us for Episode 1 of Season 2 is a writer, an actor, a producer, and the second Death Eater that we've had on this little mini podcast. Because we had Ashley Maguire in Season 1.
Brilliant.
Graham Duff, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey,
hello, Graham.
I didn't know what Ashley had been on this. I love Ashley. She's great.
She is one of my favourite people, and one of the people I said to her that if you think of what she's like in her roles, she's the most not like that in real life.
Yeah, she's so sweet.
Yeah. So I mean, I want to talk about Ideal because it's something that I had a really weird experience yesterday with a friend at work, which I will go through, but. Oh, if it's okay for me just to start with being a Death Eater.
Yeah, of course.
Because Ashley's actual experience with it, as she told us, was not particularly good. Which, if you want to hear about that, then please, all of you listen to that episode. It was fascinating. How did you get the role? Did you know someone? Did you have to audition or?
No, well, it was weird how I got the role because yes, I did audition, but it was a weird audition. I went along, and the casting director or casting director's assistant who was doing the audition. It was one of those things you get from time to time as an actor, where you go along, and sometimes the script isn't finished, and at that point the script wasn't finished. So sometimes they just ask you to talk about something, or they just interview you, or they ask you to improvise, something. And she just said, "Have you ever played any creepy characters before?" And I said, "Well, I'm 6'2" with a shaven head. I pretty much just play creepy characters. That's all I get offered. I write." For myself, for my own work, I write something else. But, if you want a Nazi, a henchman, a pirate, a paedophile, they come to me.
There you go.
So, I said, no, I played a few. And she said,
what a resume
she said, just tell us about one. Oh, I know. Yeah. I was so proud. So she said, just tell us about one of the things. So I talked about the character of Fist from Ideal, which she just set it rolling. I started talking, and then she was just on her phone the whole time and didn't look up till I stopped speaking, like about 4 minutes later or whatever. And I don't know if she was playing Tetris or she was texting someone, I don't know. And it finished, and I just thought, wow, nothing's going to come of that. And sure enough, I think a good month or so passed by, and I hadn't heard, and so I just wrote it off. And then my acting agent just phoned up out of the blue and said, they want you to do it, and it starts in something like 9 days' time or something. And I said, oh, okay. So then they sent me the script, and because when it was being written, like I say, I hadn't seen it, and the character that I was playing in the script was listed as Squat Man. And like I say, I'm 6'2", I'm not really squat. And so I thought, Squat Man, 9 minutes before they start shooting, I think somebody's dropped out. And they thought, who was that weird tall bloke who was talking about Fist or something? And I think that's probably how I got the gig. I think I was probably an emergency replacement. So I don't flatter myself that casting agents, scouring the internet for traces of me. But yeah, it was. I'm not sure what Ashley said. It was a really interesting experience on a lot of levels, and also for me, my kids were never interested in Harry Potter, so I didn't know anything about it. So I didn't understand quite what it was or what the deal was, and so it was odd.
And as you're not a background character, but you are in the background, aren't you? And you're sat at a table and things like that. Is it hard to keep because everything's going on around you, isn't it? So you're having to stay in character when you're not actually doing anything as such?
Yeah, I suppose it's probably easier. I mean, I had one line in each of the last two films, so whatever character I had, I suppose I was hopefully physically embodying. So it's probably easier to stay in character if you don't have any lines. Yeah, it was unusual. I had never worked on anything of that scale. I mean,
Right.
I was in for the first week, and the first week we shot one scene. So 5 days took one scene, which was the scene where we're all sitting around the huge table with Voldemort, and there's the Nagini comes along and all, and so and say like an episode of Ideal or Heaven or anything else I've shot. That's 5 days to shoot an episode, not 5 days to shoot one scene. And the luxury of that just floored me. And of course, you're thinking, well, yeah, but around this table, you've got Ray Fiennes, you've got Helena Bonham Carter, you've got Jason Isaacs, you've got all these people. You think, well, of course, they're all going to need close-ups. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. And like I say, I worked on quite a few things, but usually it's on I've worked on a few films in small roles, but in TV, it's all on a much smaller scale. And the schedules are so tight that you do the first day shooting and suddenly you're behind schedule by 2 days. It's just like, it's all so tight. And just to have that luxury was phenomenal. But it's weird because there was quite a lot of us, and you did feel slightly as a Death Eater, a little bit of an underclass there. But I met some really nice people, and including Ashley on that. It was great, really good.
So going on to Ideal. Now I watched Ideal first time around when it was like 2005, I believe. Was it 2005 when it started?
Yes, that's when it started. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when we got that we were gonna chat, I thought I'm gonna go back into it, and although I couldn't watch it, I was listening to it at work, so I was listening to the audio, which is a different experience, I must say, because there's lots of musical cues and musical things. I'm trying to remember what's happening here, what's going on. Is it Cartoon Head? Is it someone else? And the weird thing that happened yesterday, because I work in Stroud, I work in Stonehouse, which is one of the venues where your live show is going to come, which we'll talk about.
We are indeed. We are playing in Stroud, yes. Yeah.
And a friend that I was working with, hello Kirk, and he's a massive fan of Ideal. He said to me, and he didn't know I was listening to it, and he said to me, Pav, can you remember a show on the BBC called Ideal? And I said, mate, I am literally listening to it right now, and I'm going to speak to one of the stars and the writer of it tomorrow. We went, you're fucking kidding me. And no one's mentioned Ideal to me in like years, and it was really weird. I'd never given him any prompts.
Weird.
So first of all, you're going on about like Harry Potter being such a big thing. Ideal was a little comedy that started with Johnny Vegas on BBC. How did that come about originally?
It was quite a sort of long route, really. The character of Moz that Johnny plays was a character I wrote for myself initially. I had an Edinburgh show in 98, I think, 97, 98, I think, called Vinyl Anorak, and it was about music obsessives. And Moz was one of the characters in that. And initially he did a bit of dealing, but he was mainly like a bedroom DJ. So a lot of the stuff that was going on was around that, and him trying to get, sort of try and play out and stuff. And then off the back of that, I got offered a Radio 4 series, based on that show. So I took 6 of the characters, and each episode, that was the series was called Stereo Nation, which basically I took each of the characters to put in an individual episode. And I think episode 2 or maybe episode 3 was Moz, and it just stayed with me as a character. And then I shot a pilot that I funded with my own money in 2002. I think 2002. Which was very lo-fi, and it was all shot in a friend's flat, my friend Sean Baldwin. It was in his flat. And interestingly enough, Joanna Neary, who plays Judith in Ideal, she was in it, but she played the character of Jenny, which Matthews played in once it got to TV. And we did that, and there was a bit of a buzz around it. I took it to Baby Cow Productions, who I'd worked with before, and then they took it to the BBC, and the BBC said, we really like this, but because it's about drugs, and I personally don't think it is about drugs. I think drugs are in it, but I don't think it's about drugs. They said, because of that, we think we need a bigger star to sell it. I think if you're in it, it might die a death, but put a bigger star in it, people might give it a chance. In retrospect, I don't think it would have. I don't think people would have been. There was no negative press about the drugs anyway. Even the Daily Mail was saying, "Oh, this is great, you should watch it," and it just didn't come up. And I think that was it's. we know a lot of people do this kind of stuff. So then they commissioned some scripts, and then Henry Normal at Baby Cow said, what about Johnny Vegas for this? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I went to see Johnny live. I'd seen him before, but obviously in a different context. And it was just brilliant. I saw him 2 nights in a row. He did, I think, about an hour and 40 both nights. They had about 10 minutes in common. It was all riffing off the rip. It was just brilliant. And we met up afterwards and we chatted, and we got on really well. Good, solid sort of connection there. And I went back that night and looked at the scripts, and I heard in my head, and I thought, oh yeah, this is perfect. And so we went back to the BBC and said, what about Johnny Vegas? And they said, yeah, let's do it. So that's how the first series came about. So it was a weird sort of route, it wasn't straightforward.
And I mean, the amount of times I think I've said to people about anything that 10, 15 years ago was a different time than it is now. Do you think Ideal would have got made today if you'd have gone with it today?
No, I don't think so. I think one of the strengths of Ideal, and also one of the weaknesses in terms of because it's not how it's marketed, is it sort of has got a lot of different elements to it. It's partly a social satire. It's partly a sort of surrealist fantasia. It's partly sort of, it's got a sort of, I remember Johnny talking early on about it being social surrealism rather than social realism. And funnily enough, that appeared in a couple of reviews as well. So I think it's not, I was recently rewatching some of People Just Do Nothing, which I think is fantastic, beautifully performed, a really strong evocation of that world, and the improvised nature of it, just you really buy into it. And I think, great characters. But I think that is I'll say that's just that, but that is very straightforward. It's about a bunch of stoners who are really into music, and they're living life at a low level, but everything's big stakes. And that's part of what Ideal's about as well. But Ideal's also got other elements into it, and I don't think it so easily falls into a category as some programs do. So I think today, I think it would struggle to get commissioned. I do.
I did read a review. I think it was last week, and it was saying things like it was a cross between the royal family, Spaced, and it was one of the most depressing comedies that they'd ever seen. And I've not
seen that one.
Yeah, I kind of understand that, in the fact that the surrealism, but it's played straight. With someone like Cartoon Head, it's something that's totally ridiculous, but everybody accepts it in the world. It's just a normal thing, and I do find it I think people. I think if they, because I love the fact that it's still on BBC iPlayer, so people can, experience.
Well, it's only just back on. It came back on October last year, and it hadn't been available for 10 years until October. And it's we'd already decided. I mean, we'll talk about this later, but we'd already decided to do a live version of the show, and then that happened just after we'd started working on it. I thought, well, it's obviously meant to be,
So, talking about the live show, what was the reason for bringing it back all these years later?
Well, Johnny and I had always said, let's do something else with it. And at one point we were trying to get a film off the ground, but somehow it just didn't come together. And it was came close a couple of times, but it's very difficult to get films made. So I think we just thought, maybe not a film then. And then weirdly, just before COVID kicked in, I think end of 2019, we were talking about another project. And then I can't remember, one of us just said, oh, and by the way, how about doing a live thing? And, Johnny got quite excited about that, and then I talked to Henry Normal, who was the script editor, and I said, we're thinking about it. He said, oh yeah, great idea. So we started a couple of initial meetings, and then of course society crumbled. And, cut to a few years later, and, we were all doing different things. And then again, just over a year ago, Johnny and I were talking on the phone again about something completely different. And then I think I said, do you know, we should think about that live show again. And I had a meeting, I think the following week, with Phil Jones, who runs Edge Street Productions, who are the producers of the show, again, about a different project. And at the end, I just 10 minutes before the end of the meeting, I said, oh, by the way, I was talking to Johnny. We were thinking about the Ideal, doing Ideal live. And Phil just got really enthused. And he said, yeah, we could do that. And then he started to talk about, what about these venues? What about that? And it was suddenly that became what the meeting was about. And I was thinking, oh, this is traveling quite quickly. Literally, I think about 3 weeks later, it was in motion and we'd started working on it. So it was it all just sort of happened from it being a sort of, oh, why don't we do that? And usually things move very slowly. Productions, TV, radio, theatre, it's glacial. But this has been, it's over a year since we first started talking about it, but it's over a year since somebody said, how about this? And, we're just about to do this national tour. So, yeah, it just, the stars were aligned, to use a cliche.
Yeah. So I take it it's set in present day. So it isn't, we're now catching up with Moz and everybody, all the other characters in present day and what they've been getting on with. So can you give us any little tidbits of what the story is going to be about?
I don't want to tell you too much about it. I can tell you a few little bits and pieces. It is very close to Ideal as was on TV. It's partly a murder mystery. That's one element of it. Moz has got a brand new girlfriend, and everybody keeps telling him that she's way out of his league. And she's very stylish and clever and sort of sharp and stuff. And it's like she really gives him a run for his money. My character, the character I play, Big Gay Brian, he has now got an OnlyFans. Of course he has. Why, it's like that is his destiny. Everything has been leading towards this.
I'm surprised he wasn't the one that started OnlyFans.
Yeah. Yeah, his is probably not OnlyFans. So he's doing that. Colin, who played by Ben Crompton, amazing actor who's been in, since Ideal, he's been in things like Game of Thrones and so on. So his character, Colin, he's just come out of prison. He spent most of his 20s and the first part of his 30s on probation. And now he's just come out of prison, and he really misses prison. It's just it doesn't, you can't get used to the freedom. It doesn't feel right. There's that going on. Psycho Paul and Cartoon Head have got a new business going, and it's quite seedy and sordid. Yeah. So I don't want to say more than that. No,
absolutely. I will be disappointed if Brian at least hasn't got a website called Scrummy.com. I mean, you have to.
He does have a website, but it's not called that.
Oh, it's not.
I'm not going to tell you what it's called. No. He's got a specialist website with subscribers. Yeah,
I bet he has. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I suppose it was the episodes were pretty much like a play anyway, when they were sort of pretty much all set in the flat, if you like. So
yeah, I mean, the first series was just set in Moz's flat, which was like, I think 3 rooms, and then the second series we also included Judy's flat, which was across the way, and a couple of series later we had a flat upstairs as well. But it happened quite organically. I think twice did we actually step outside the flat. So yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that made me want to do that. Actually, initially, the pilot that I mentioned earlier, that was all shot through police security cameras. The police had sort of somehow thought that Moz was a much bigger fish in the sort of in the criminal underground than he was, so they'd secretly installed cameras in his flat. So it was all the stories were all told by that, and it was essentially the same story, but it was told by that. But you also had a voiceover, and in the pilot, Steve Coogan did the voiceover, which it's never been screened. We didn't even put it on the DVDs, but we might do something with it at some point. But so he's like commenting as the police believe blah blah blah. So it had that vibe. So that meant initially it was all supposed to be in the flat anyway. And then once we got into pre-production, I was just sort of thinking, there's been quite a few mock documentaries recently. I just thought, let's do something that's not mediated. And also it's a bit braver, because the thing about if you do a mock documentary with a voiceover, you can shore up stuff all the time. You can put in as many extra gags during the edit as you want to sort of shore up the stuff. And I just thought, let's be a bit bolder. Let's just really pare it down, keep it all in the flat. And I really believe that restrictions can be really liberating. I'm obviously not the first person to make that observation, but I think you put some restrictions in place and it starts you thinking about other routes that you might not have had otherwise. And I think when you can do absolutely anything, it's very easy to descend into option paralysis, where it's like, I could do anything. Yeah. Whereas you sort of say, right, well, you can't, these are the parameters, it's this many characters, it's this many rooms. It just makes, it's really inventive. And I think you look at, a lot of like prime musical forms are like that, like the blues or acid house, reggae. It's like made of few components. And I think there's always something really impressive when you get maximum play from minimum components, I think. So I wanted to do something like that, basically. Yeah.
Would you ever go back to doing another Ideal TV series?
Yeah, we've been talking about that. I mean, obviously, the live show is what's taking precedence at the moment. But yeah, we're talking about when this is done, maybe reconvening and seeing if we could get anybody interested in putting us on TV with a new series. Yeah, I mean, it's always been in the back of our minds because it's never gone away. And I think. Yeah, there's still, because when I sat down to write the play, and it's all very well, you sort of think, yeah, let's do this, and then you sit down, and the harsh reality is,
you've got right, to write it.
Yeah, can you spend day after day after day at this laptop with only a pot of mint tea for help? And I just thought, well, can I access these characters? And even if I can, have they still got something to say? And it flowed. It really flowed. So yeah, and it was that thing. I think. Part of the joy of it is thinking, okay, I think the show finished 14, maybe 16 years ago. So it's like a lot of time has elapsed. So like the people that had babies born, towards the end of the series, like Plastic Face and Baby Jenny, they're now in their late teens. So so there's some of those characters that we knew as sort of carefree hedonists are now parents. So there's all that to play around with as well. So yeah.
Was it easy to slip back into Brian, so to say, so to speak?
Brian has haunted me forever. So no, that was okay. It's a tremendous advantage as a writer to be able to hear the actors' voices in your head. It really is.
I can imagine.
So that's we've got sort of quite a short rehearsal time on this because that's what we can afford. Yeah. But one of the great advantages is everybody knows each other. Everybody knows their characters inside out. And usually your first 2, 3, 4 days of rehearsals are finding out those things, getting to know each other and getting to know your character. And we don't have to worry about that. So, I think we do. We all sort of feel that we've sort of already got over the first hurdle without realising it.
Yeah. So when did it kick off? When does the tour kick off?
The tour kicks off at the Lowry in Manchester in Salford. And that's on the 8th of September. So we're doing a week at the Lowry. Then we're going off around the country. So Shrewsbury, Ilkley, Sunderland, Sheffield, Stamford, Bury St Edmunds, Norwich, Halifax, Buxton, Stroud, the Subrooms on October the 1st, Caerphilly, Frome, which I don't think I've ever been to Frome before, then Worthing, and then we're finishing off with 4 nights at the Bloomsbury in London. So yeah, we don't get many days off, so I think we're all going to be taking food through a straw by the end of it. But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting.
And I take it tickets are available now, are they?
They are, yeah. If you go to any of the venues or go to Edge Street Live. .com. It's all on there. So tickets are available now. Some are already sold out, but there's some that are still available. Yeah,
we'll put the link in the show notes so people can just click on that and then go straight through to get into. And if you haven't watched Ideal, I would thoroughly recommend going on BBC iPlayer and watching it, and then getting your tickets to go and see it live. So we'll talk a little bit more after that. But we want to crack on with your top 10. How hard was it to culminate your top 10 of movies?
On a scale of 1 to very, a lot. Yeah, it was. I mean, I know what my top 2 are, and they sometimes largely the number 1 slot is largely held by the same film. Sometimes the number 2 slot switches over. But yeah, so there's lots of stuff I love, and for different reasons. But also I thought, so when I put the list together, I thought, right, well, I'll put some things that I definitely know are my favourite. And I thought also I'll put in a couple of recent films that I've really, really enjoyed. Okay. I think it's very easy to just get caught up in this notion of classics, or things that impacted on you when you were young. But I put in a couple of very recent films which really blew me away as well. But yeah, it's almost impossible. You know this, Carl. It's almost impossible.
It absolutely is, and we did our episode way back. Myself and my co-host Neil, we did our episode way back, and it would change now, and it would change next week, and it would change the week after that. So it is a moment in time kind of thing. But what's your number 10? Give us your number 10.
Okay, so number 10 is a film from 1960. It's The Rebel, starring Tony Hancock, written by Galton and Simpson, his long-term writers. It's directed by Robert Day, who was like a sort of journeyman director, but it meant that he could direct anything. So like earlier on, he directed Corridors of Blood, a Karloff film in '58, and then the year before he did The Rebel, he directed Two Way Stretch, which is a Peter Sellers comedy.
Sellers, yeah.
And that was like one of the biggest British selling. I think it was like the number 2 and number 3 biggest selling films of the year in the UK. So Robert Day was on a high, and Tony Hancock was, even at this stage, he was like still the nation's favourite comedian. I've been obsessed by Hancock since I was about 8. My mum's a massive Hancock fan, and she sort of gave me a couple of the albums. I was just become a total addict. And I love Galton and Simpson's writing as well. It's a rare month goes by when I don't listen to some Hancock. But have you seen it? Do you know the film I'm talking about?
I've not. No.
Okay.
And this I've said before. This is one of the beauties of these episodes, is that there's people that are a lot more sophisticated than I am and a lot cleverer than I am, opening the door to me to movies, because I'm very lazy. I'll just watch the same 10 movies over and over again. Whereas these kind of movies, there's been a couple that I've already had, but I've picked out and watched and thought I've wasted my life by watching, Austin Powers for the 15th time, and there's other things to watch.
Yeah. But I think that is one of the great things about culture. Sorry, a trite remark to make, but I think, I couldn't spend much more time than I do engaging with like new music, new film. And yet all the time people go, have you heard this? Have you seen that? I go, no. So it's like, and that's great. Here we are at the narrow end of the funnel, but there is so much to absorb. So I'll tell you about The Rebel. So it's partly a satire of the art world. And it's probably the most, certainly for its time, and I'd struggle to think of anything that's done it better. It's basically, Tony Hancock he's like a drone in an office in London, but he does sketches of the other people he works with. And they're really rudimentary, the sort of thing that like a sort of 8-year-old could do. But he's convinced he's a genius. He leaves the office. He goes back to his sort of little apartment with its Edwardian furnishings and stuff. He goes into the bedroom and he's got a massive sculpture there that's a bit like a sort of Picasso type thing. And he's convinced of his genius. And he decides to jack it all in and go to Paris and live the life of an artist. And he lodges with another artist played by Paul Massey, who is actually genuinely talented. And his work's a little bit out of step for the time. He's sort of doing work that's influenced by Cézanne. By the 60s, Cézanne was like, well into the past. But anyway, he gets picked up by a major dealer, but they think Hancock is the artist. So Hancock makes his name in the art world on somebody else's work. I won't tell you any more than that, but it's laugh out loud funny. Hancock, it was a total comedic genius. And I think the thing is with the TV shows is they have the restrictions I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. They're all made, they're shot as live, they're made in one evening. So if the set wobbles or somebody fluffs a line or there's somebody in the audience with an irritating laugh, you just have to live with it. Whereas in this film, they obviously had the luxury of multiple tapes. So it's, for me, it's up there with that Chaplin in terms of like film comedy. It is so good.
Oh, really?
Yeah, honestly. It's not that it's all physical, it's a lot of verbal comedy, but there is some great physical stuff in it. There's a lot of great visual gags. There's lines that you may recognise that get quoted out of context from that film. Galton and Simpson also wrote The Steptoe and Son.
Yeah,
those are their two big things, and so I think their writing is on a par with somebody like Joe Orton. I think they're really clever, witty, well-informed writers. And it's comedy that does not talk down to the audience. It talks, it's sort of, it raises the game and says to the audience, you have to think about this a little bit. You're not going to, we're not handing this to you. Just think about this a little bit. But it's so rewarding. And that's quite rare for the time as well, I think. Yeah.
Tony Hancock is one of those people that slipped through the comedy cracks for me. I don't know why. Because I was like massive into listening to old Goon shows and Spike Milligan and like Peter Sellers. I think he's an absolute genius. And then I tended to go on. Laurel and Hardy was massive for me. People like that. And then like Steptoe and Son. I love Steptoe and Son, but I don't know why he seemed to like evade me for some reason.
Well, I think Steptoe and Son, because I think the first couple of series of Steptoe and Son are in black and white, but a lot of all the late ones are in colour. So they got repeated more. That's and I think, 80s, 90s, black and white stuff just was not repeated. So I think for some people, Hancock's one of these people who you're either unaware of or utterly obsessed with. There doesn't seem to be much middle ground. I know quite a few other Hancock obsessives.
Yeah. Great one to start with. It's another one to add to my ever-growing list of something to give a try to. Okay, you're number 9.
Okay, so I reckon you probably will have heard of this one. From 1973, it's the Satanic Rites of Dracula.
Oh, okay.
A Hammer film. It's directed by Alan Gibson, written by Don Horton. You've got Peter Cushing giving a just pitch-perfect Van Helsing, Joanna Lumley as his daughter, and of course Christopher Lee as Dracula. It's the last Hammer Dracula film, essentially. It's an unusual the Hammer, in a belated attempt to catch up with the sort of the vibe of things like The Exorcist and The Omen, started abandoning the more gothic horrors and doing things with more contemporary settings, which Amicus, their rivals, have been doing forever. But Hammer were largely, doing gothic pieces set in the past. So the first one, Dracula AD 1972. A lot of people think is laughable, and there are a lot of unintentional laughs in there, but amazing score, some great sequences and some creepy stuff, and some very good performances as well. But Satanic Rites of Dracula, the second contemporary Hammer Dracula, I think is excellent. It's beautifully paced. The storytelling in it is really well judged. For the first sort of 25 minutes, you've got one scene playing out of this ritual going on, and they keep interrupting it with these other scenes about this guy's been arrested who's escaped from this house where they're doing these rituals, and it just flows. You're sort of a third of the way into the film before you know what's happened. And the writer's Don Horton, who a couple of years earlier had written some key Doctor Who episodes for when John Pertwee just started. Say he did. Mind of Evil is one of his, and he's just, I don't know, I think he's a really gifted storyteller, or certainly was at this point in his career. And it's interesting because it mixes the supernatural with what you might call super science, the sort of things that would have originally been on, the sort of ideas rather that would have originally been on things like ITV's The Avengers. So it's like, it's sort of sci-fi, but it feels like it's sort of got one foot in reality. So it's got that alongside the vampires and so on. And I think one of the key stories is that Dracula wants to release a plague because he's tired of living forever and having to feed on blood. He wants rest. He wants to rest in peace. And so the only way to do that is to wipe out the entire human race. And they've got this bacillus that they're planning to unleash, this virus that will wipe everybody out. And when they wiped everybody out, of course, there's no blood to feed on, so Dracula will have to die. So I think that's an interesting story in itself. And you've got motorbike assassins in Afghan jackets. You've got scantily clad female vampires chained up in the basement. It's got so much going for it, and a brilliant score as well. So yeah, a fantastic title sequence as well, with these low angled sort of panning shots across London landmarks, and you've got a shadow of Dracula which is just increasing in size throughout the thing. So I won't have a word said against it. That's what I'm saying, Carl.
I mean, the weird thing is like the two things that gave me nightmares when I was younger was Christopher Lee as Dracula and John Pertwee's Doctor Who. They were the two things that I would absolutely freak out if I ever saw them. So I've never seen a Christopher Lee Dracula movie all the way through. I've seen clips. So I need to, if you recommend this one as the one to watch.
Well, I think this is the contemporary one to watch. I think if you're going to watch one of the original Gothic ones, the original Dracula is great, but it feels a bit trapped in the amber of its time. It's quite reserved in some respects. I would say Dracula, Prince of Darkness is the one to watch. It was shot in really wide CinemaScope as well. If you can see it at the cinema, even better. But yeah, that's a great film. Dracula, Prince of Darkness.
Okay, that's a good one to go for. Okay, your number 8 then, please, Graham.
So this is a film from 2024 called La Bête, The Beast, a French film directed by Bertrand Bonello, and it stars what's she called? Who's the most recent? Leia Seydoux, who was in the Bond films, and George McKay. I didn't know what to expect when I did, because it's sort of marketed as a sort of sci-fi film, really, and there's a bit of that to it, but not really. It's as much a horror, and it's quite Lynchian, but it's got no David Lynch motifs. It's in no way lifts from Lynch. It's fascinating. I find it utterly gripping, and Bonello, he directed it, he wrote it, and he co-wrote the score. So it's a real auteur piece. One of the key ideas in it is that you can have this procedure or this sequence of treatment, which allows you to go to sort of mentally revisit past lives and erase the trauma that was caused in these past lives that's affecting in your current life. So it's a fascinating idea. But having said that, that idea is quite buried. It's quite a mood piece in some respects. It's the first major film that I saw that was clearly a post-COVID film. There's definite echoes of COVID in there. There's some great. It says a lot about the idea of stalking. Some of the stuff set in contemporary LA with a stalker feels really believable and quite chilling. The stuff set, the sort of fantasy éclat stuff in there as well, which is beautifully realised. There's a scene where this whole shop is on fire and they've got to swim underwater to escape it. It's a really unusual film. La Bête, 2024.
Wow, I've never heard of it, I must admit, but...
Yeah, it is. I'm saying that. Lea Seydoux, she's the Bond girl in No Time to Die. Yeah, so she's the lead in it. And George McKay, who is a young British actor, although some of the time he plays like a British guy, French guy, and an American guy at the end. So it's another thing. You got actors playing multiple parts, but they're from different lives and stuff. So it's an interesting one because there's a lot of immediate visceral impact from it, and emotional impact, but also it's one of those where afterwards there's quite a lot to chew over as well. And I found myself sort of having little revelations about it afterwards. So that is really recommended. If you're looking for a recent film that it's sort of, a bit horror, a bit sci-fi, romantic drama, a bit thriller, doesn't easily fall into any category, but that's one of my very favourite films of the last few years.
Oh, right. Do you have a specific genre of movie that you enjoy, or is it just, if it's a good movie, it's a good movie?
A horror and weird fiction and sort of more surreal art house stuff, I suppose, I tend to gravitate towards more. Do you know what? Even when I was a kid, I was never particularly interested in films where it was all male, where there wasn't women in it as well. So I was never into war films or cowboy films, particularly because they were so male dominated. Things like horror, spy films, they always had interesting female characters in. So I think I was a bit more that I sort of went off in that direction more. So I suppose probably horror is the key. Is my key thing that I go to most of all. Yeah, I reckon. And it's interesting because a couple of ones I want to talk about later, things, but they're sort of marketed as horror, but they're not. And that's the thing. Horror is such a big seller now. And I was talking to a young filmmaker a couple of weeks ago at this festival, and he was saying he had a couple of ideas and there's horror and this sort of thing. And I said, I don't know anything about either of your ideas. I said, but what I do know is you can always get a license to do horror. You can sell distribution. You can get a distribution deal pretty much anywhere if it's a horror. Unless it's absolutely appalling, but even then, there's usually seems to be some kind of market.
Yeah. And is that because they're cheaper to make, and they tend to have a good? I mean, if it hits, it always seems to be the horror movies that have a low budget but a really high, box office.
I just think there is always a market for horror. I think people will always go and see it, and always have. And you can say certain decades or certain eras were a golden age, but I think horror always sells, and I think it's probably bigger now than it has been since the 60s. I think it's a huge market now, and the number of horror films that turn into franchises is notable as well. I think horror's popular. Horror fans want new horror. So, it doesn't matter if you've spent your lifetime watching horror. It's one of the few genres where I think you're not just going to go back and look at the classics, which you may do with like samurai films or whatever. Because part of horror is about surprise and shock. And so you watch a horror film 2 or 3 times, you're getting a lot from it, but you're not getting that initial bump. Yeah. And so I think horror fans always want to see horror. Horror films are great for dates. And I just think it's a broad market. It's one of the first film genres that younger people get into when they can see adult films, or perhaps before they should be watching adult films. So I just think it is a huge market. It never really gets talked about. It never really gets acknowledged. But, if you think about it, a lot of major filmmakers started off doing horror and then branched out. because it's a great way in. And also, I think, for younger directors, it's probably a good way to show your chops.
Yeah.
Can you scare people? Can you edit things convincingly? Can you do decent, makeup effects or computer effects? So, yeah. I think it's part of the continuum of film, but it's sort of treated as an underclass, but actually it's one of the main planks of cinema, and always has been from the very beginning.
And one of the most profitable, I would say, for horror.
Oh yes, yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
That's okay. Okay, your number 7 then, please.
Okay, so this is from the year 2000, and this is quite often around about number 3 or 4 in the list. It's In the Mood for Love by Wong Kar-wai. Right. Do you know this?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it, but I have heard of it, yeah. Somebody else, I think, had this in their top 10.
Yeah, I would really recommend it. It's a romance, but it's a very chaste romance. But Wong Kar-wai's films are usually romances, and as you can imagine, I've just been talking about horror. Romance isn't something I particularly sort of run towards in cinematically, and rom-coms and things like that. I think for me there's more misfires than there is hits. But I think something about Wong Kar-wai, a lot of his early films were made with no specific schedule, so they were just shot over a period of time, and they've got a naturalism to them. And I think he's got his way of working with actors creates this real intimacy. So you quite often feel that you're right in there. It's set in the early 60s, and it stars Maggie Cheung and Tony Leung, both at peak beauty. They're both. He is stunningly handsome. He makes George Clooney look like Hulk Hogan, honestly. And she is just the most perfectly chiseled beauty. And the thing is, they're both phenomenal actors as well. And they are in the same guest house. And there's obviously, from the moment they meet, there is this intense sexual and romantic chemistry between them. And so, but because it's the early 60s and it's China, and it's very, very prim and proper, they can't let that show. And so they're heading towards a romance. That's obviously what the film is about. And it does this beautiful sleight of hand in the storytelling where you keep thinking, they're going to start the affair. And then you realize they already have started the affair, and that you have been put in the position of the other people that are in the guest house, and you're just seeing what they want you to see. You're just seeing this sort of decorum and this politeness gone. Two other things that make this, three things actually that make it such a good film is the script is, obviously I've only seen it with subtitles, but the script is great. The storytelling's great, but there's some great gags in it, and it's genuinely, it gets under the skin of what it's like to be in these situations. And the costume design is phenomenal. In every scene, Maggie Cheung Manyuk is wearing a different, I think they're called cheongsam, like a sort of classic sort of Chinese dress, the sort of tight-fitting, long sort of dress in sort of satins and stuff. Every single scene, she's got another amazing thing. She's beautiful, got a beautiful figure, very, very poised. But the costumes, I remember reading an essay by Kim Newman where he was talking about the films of Kubrick, and he said Kubrick's films are films that are as much told through architecture as they are through character. And I think In the Mood for Love is a story that's partly told through costume, and I can't explain it more than that. If you see it, you'll understand. And the other thing is the cinematographer is Christopher Doyle, who is one of the world's top cinematographers. Very experimental, although it doesn't feel it when you're watching it. It feels quite formal. The colours, the framing, everything about it is just, it's so considered. I don't know how many years it took to make, but you can see there's a lot of work has gone into this, and it's very, very moving. There's a piece of music that is used on the score called Yumi's Theme. Can't remember the name of the composer now, but it was actually taken from a film that came out in '92 called Yumi, and it's reused in this film. And it's a really nice sort of indicator of he just took his time and he looked around for things that were going to work. One of the alternate titles for it in Cantonese is Flower Like Years. which I think is a beautiful title. And it's about beauty and delicacy and decorum and passion. I cannot recommend it too highly. If you've not seen it, it's a real treat.
I'm pretty sure it was Ashley that had this in the top 10.
Ah, maybe.
So it's obviously it's a favourite.
Death Eater's choice. Yeah.
I absolutely love it. Okay then, so that was your number 7. So your number 6 then, please.
So this is a film that had a huge influence on me. It came out in 74, but I didn't see it until, I think, 82. It's The Phantom of Liberty, a French film directed by Louis Buñuel, who did Belle de Jour, Milky Way, Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, and so on. So he was a surrealist. He'd been a school friend of Salvador Dali. They were quite tight, and they'd worked together on Un Chien Andalou and L'Âge d'Or, which are the key surrealist films from a much earlier era. And so a lot of people will be familiar with Un Chien Andalou, which is the scene where, as a cloud passes across the moon, somebody slits a woman's eye with a razor blade.
Oh, right. Yes.
It's an incredibly famous scene. But I mean, it's a shocking image. But the whole film was an absolute shock to the system, to the establishment at the time, because it is so untethered from reality, from narrative, yet it's made so formally, a beautiful piece of work. Buñuel carried on as a filmmaker. He and Dali fell out, and he's sort of fallen from favour a little bit. He's not a name to quote, but he was quite influential at the time. So he did Belle de Jour with Catherine Deneuve, which was quite a famous film about a wealthy a French woman who decides to become a prostitute because she's potentially bored with life, really. So she has no reason to do it. She's not even that sexually aroused, but she just does it as something to do. But Los Olvidados, which is a film about young homeless people in Spain. And then he sort of hit his stride in the 70s with the Milky Way, That Obscure Object of Desire, Phantom of Liberty, Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. They're really quite sort of cruel, biting satires of bourgeois society, of Catholicism and stuff like that. So he worked with a writer called Jean-Claude Carrier, and Carrier co-wrote or wrote a lot of his big films from that era. What just blew me away about The Phantom of Liberty is it is a film in which around about every 8 to 9 minutes, the key characters change, and you never see the people you've been watching again. So it's a series of connected vignettes. So you might be in a scene where there's a sort of wealthy bourgeois couple and they're talking to their maid about some dirty postcards they've been given, and then then they ask the maid to get some tea, and then the maid leaves the room, and you follow the maid. You never see that couple again, and then the maid meets somebody else, and it evolves. It's really, really funny. It's very surreal. There's a bit where this guy's in bed, and every night at midnight, an emu walks into his. Sorry, not an emu. An ostrich walks into his bedroom, and he keeps having this recurring dream. I don't want to give too much away. I think Python were very influenced by Buñuel. Right. You can see quite a bit of Python in his work. But yeah, Phantom of Liberty. It's a sort of critique of everything, of every strata of society, particularly French society. But there's a lot of resonance for other societies as well, other countries. I will never tire of it, and it's one of those where there's so much in it, because like I say, there's so many little stories and vignettes. It's like you can't hold it all in your head, so it sustains multiple viewings. Right, it definitely does. Yeah.
So the surrealism in that, and you're obviously a fan of surrealism. When you were writing Ideal originally, was that something that you wanted to put in there, having these little surreal moments, or was that just something that naturally came into the story?
Well, I think. A lot of what I do, whatever it is, I mean, Ideal's a prime example, but there's a lot of stuff in other things I write. I write about. People always say, "Oh, it's easier to if you're writing a review, it's easier to write a bad review than a good review." I'm really not interested in writing bad reviews. I do review stuff sometimes, and it's like I don't want to waste the ink. I don't want to waste the thought on something I don't like. Right. So I'm, and there is so much brilliant stuff out there, and part of one of my missions is to I've never had that notion of you keep the cool discoveries to yourself, because that was made you cool. I just think, no, if something's brilliant, as many people as possible need to know about this. Every week I do like an online music show, and it's all pretty much all new music stuff that's come out in the last couple of weeks. I just find that fascinating, and I love putting it out there. I've got my own record label. I sort of, it's a mixture of established artists, but sometimes it's new, it's debut stuff, and I just think these are great. People need to know about these. And so I think Ideal reflects my interests, right. Transcendence, altered states, left field music, surrealism. And I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I never called it surreal, but it's been called surreal so many times now. I've just fallen into it. I just say it's surreal because it's a shorthand.
Right.
But I was talking to Johnny about this the other day, and we're saying it's amazing how many people come up to us, together or individually, and they'll say, some people say they like the show, or this is their favourite episode, but the number of people that say that was like watching my life, that was like watching me and my mates, right. That was, that stuff, and the drug experiences, and that felt like I was watching my life, and it's a great compliment to hear that. Or, that's one of the things I've loved the most, of people saying that, because if you think, oh, well, that's really connected with somebody. You think, well, you got, on the one hand, people calling it really surreal, and other people say, oh, it's a perfect evocation of my life. So I think, well, either there's some people living very surreal lives, or, surrealism is part of life anyway. And, the dream state, we spend, how many years of our lives dreaming, so that's the same brain as our waking brain doing all that stuff. So we've got this surreal life going on all the time. The subconscious is not ordered. The subconscious is chaotic. It is, these weird hybrid notions and disconnections. So, yeah. But yeah, no, it's not there by accident. The surrealism is there. Because, I mean, one of my biggest influences, and we'll come to this a bit later, is Lindsay Anderson and David Sherwin, who did If and Oh Lucky Man and Britannia Hospital. And they're, there's a lot of surrealism in that, but there's a lot of social realism as well. So, yeah.
Okay. So on to your number 5 then, please.
So again, this is a recent film. This is a film last year, and I had an odd relationship with this film. This is Jane Schoenbrun's I Saw the TV Glow. Have you seen this?
No.
It's an A24 film. Came out last year. So I was at the cinema watching something else. I can't recall what it was now. And a trailer came on for I Saw the TV Glow. And the trailer absolutely sells it as a horror film. There's no two ways about it. It's like the way it's edited, the images they choose to focus on. I came out thinking, oh yeah, I need to see that. I need to see that. It looks like a really unusual, quirky urban horror film. It's got that thing you quite often get in A24 films, where there's a sort of slightly neon vibe to it. The colours have obviously been pumped up in the grade, so that it's very vivid and vibrant. But it's not a horror film. It's not a horror film. And whilst I was watching it, because I try not to read too many reviews, so I didn't know anything about it other than the trailer. So while I was watching, I was thinking, so when's it going to kick off then? So when's the horror going to start?
You're waiting for it.
Yeah. And it isn't a horror film. There are trace elements of horror in it, but it's far more in the nature of what you might call a sort of autistic coming-of-age film. It's a very different film to Donnie Darko. It's got very little in common with it at all, very different aesthetic, different story. But in the way that Donnie Darko is a sort of autistic, a neuroatypical coming-of-age film, it's more like that. But it says some beautiful things about our relationship with television, with cult television, and how that changes as you get older. The central performance is by a young actor called Justice Smith, and he's quite introverted, and he meets this slightly emo-ish girl, and they form this bond over this cult TV series called The Pink Opaque. And you get little glimpses of this, and she's got like bootleg videos of it and stuff. And it seems like a sort of slightly weird, like a little bit Buffy-ish, but not really, and a slightly weird sort of Midwestern aesthetic. But you only catch a few glimpses of it. And so they bond over this, and they're obviously both slightly autistic or neurotypical, and they have this friendship which develops, and she goes off and she returns, and then he becomes older and he's got to cope with life, and then he starts watching reruns of the film of the series Pink Opaque that he was watching when he was younger, and he perceives it in a completely different way. So I was watching it and I was thinking, oh, that's pretty good. That's an amazing performance. Wow, that's great. But at the same time, I'm thinking, yeah, but is somebody going to get stabbed? Is something weird going to, when's the, and there is no real, well, actually, no, there is some horror, but it's more.
So you're just waiting for it, aren't you?
But it comes in from a slightly more oblique angle. And it finished and I thought, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. It wasn't what I was expecting. It was pretty good. And then I found, and I struggle to remember the last time I felt this about a film. I found the next 3 days I could not get it out of my mind to the degree that I was busy and I was trying to work on some of the stuff, and I wish I could stop thinking about that fucking film, because it was just taking over a bit too much, and I was thinking, and I was going from because it wasn't the film I expected. Oh, what an amazing performance! Oh, and that scene, and then, and I don't mind admitting this because I'm a new man. I started crying. I was thinking about a couple of the scenes in it. I started crying, and I thought, right, that I have never experienced that before. I've cried at films plenty of times. Watch the scene and find it emotionally moving, and you cry or you well up or whatever. But I was thinking through it. I think it was at least 2 days later, and I started crying about it. And I was thinking, wow, that's something special, and I really want to see it again. But it feels too soon. I need to leave it a little while so I can experience it again. And also, I want the notion that I was this horror film notion to leave me. There is a couple of very strange, horrifying images in it, but it's good for all kinds of reasons. I think Justice Smith's performance is so subtle, and you really feel every heartbeat with him. He's just like, he struggles in the world. And there's a couple of unforgettable scenes in it. So I saw the TV. Another great score as well by Alex G. Lots of really sustained chords and sort of flickering noises and stuff. It's a good score.
It always blows my mind. I've always had this feeling that I still haven't watched my favourite movie yet, and I still haven't heard. Ooh,
that's a good idea.
And I still haven't heard my greatest ever song, because there is so much stuff out there that, whether it's classic or new, that is just. You just feel like like Tony Hancock slipped through the cracks, and there's all these movies, and I may watch. I saw the TV Glow and think that is the greatest movie I've ever seen in my life. Do you know what I mean? It's some part of it's frustrating with the fact that what is the greatest thing out there is still not entered into my life. So maybe exciting. Maybe it's exciting that
I think it is exciting. That is exciting. I think and that's part of why I wanted to put like this and Labette on there, because I just thought, well, I think I was probably in my late 20s by the time I started thinking, oh Look, You Man is my absolute favourite film. It's the film I've watched the most times. We'll talk about that in a bit. But so the things where you sort of, it takes you a while. And I think, I Saw the TV Glow may move right up to number 2 or number 1. I don't know, because I've only watched it once. But I think, sometimes you need time. I think a lot of great art takes time. And I think your perception shifts over time, whether it's a painting, a film, a book, whatever. I think your perception shifts over time. And I think sometimes you need multiple exposure, or you need time to reflect before you can truly sort of understand or appreciate something.
And it's also a great gift that after however many years you've been watching movies, you can still find a movie that will make you cry after you've watched it.
I literally have never had that experience before. And a couple of people said reviews have said it's a sort of metaphor for the trans experience. And James Schoenbrunn, the director, did start hormone replacement therapy, I think, in the lead up to this. I've got to say, I didn't really spot that. And as you can probably tell, I think about films a lot, and I'm a writer and look at stories. It's in there, but again, it's a little bit like the horror film. For me, that didn't feel like the sort of key thing in there. It felt like it was one of the flavors. Right. But I think, if I'd be interested, to know what more trans people thought about it as a viewing experience. It's again another one that doesn't so easily fall into a clear category. My best way of describing it is like an autistic coming of age film. I think that's the best. And if that sounds really off-putting, don't, because it's thoroughly entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, your number 4 then, please.
Okay, so this again, this is another one that was quite influential on me, and I would have seen it, I think, when I was 15. So it's an Amicus horror film called Scream and Scream Again.
Okay.
And it was shot in 1969. It wasn't released until 1970. It's directed by Gordon Hessler. It's one of only 2 films that features Vincent Price, Peter Cushing, and Christopher Lee all in the same film.
Wow.
But Peter Cushing doesn't have any scenes interacting with. In fact, he's only got one scene. So there's no sort of actively skirmishes in there. Everybody sort of occupies their own zone. Have you seen this one?
I've not. No, I've not. But, I mean, that's got 3 of like Mount Rushmore of horror,
exactly,
really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's based on a novel called The Disoriented Man, and the script for the film is by Christopher Wickling, who wrote. He also wrote To the Devil a Daughter, and he wrote Demons of the Mind, which is a brilliant gothic 70s hammer. It doesn't get mentioned. Like Michael Horden's in it. That's a really genuinely creepy film, Demons of the Mind. So he was a really good writer. His stuff tends to have large casts, and also Cry of the Banshee is another one of Chris Wickling's scripts. His scripts tend to have large casts, and also he sort of chops the narrative up. So there tends not to be, you tend to be thrown about in time or whatever. But what he does with Scream and Scream Again, he basically follows pretty much scene for scene how the book is written. And it's interesting because you watch the first sort of 25 minutes of it, and it's like you're watching 3 different films. So there's a detective in London who's trying to solve some murders where women are found with all the blood drained, played by Alfred Marks, who was primarily known as a comedy actor.
Comedy actor, yeah.
Yeah, but he does a brilliant turn as Detective Belliver. He's like a very hard-bitten, sour, sarcastic police officer. And also you can tell he's improvising a little bit, some of the stuff. And you can sometimes see some of the other characters, some of the other police characters trying to keep a straight face because he's just throwing in little one-liners. So that's a really nice, bouncy, crisp performance. So you've got that going on. You've got another story that's going on. He keeps cutting to this fascist state, and you don't know where it is. It's sort of hinted it's somewhere in Eastern Europe, and they've got this very sort of almost Nazi flag, but it's not, with like 3 arrows on it. And it's very restrictive. You can't escape this country. If you do, you get mown down by the police. And there's obviously something happening. There's one of the higher ups in the party, the political party here in power. It's like a sort of military power, really. They're covering up some dark secrets, and they're murdering people and torturing. So you've got that going on, and then you've got scenes going on in this sort of 60s. Like I say, shot in 1969. It's very high 60s Carnaby sort of vibe. This sort of nightclub where you've got the psychedelic pop band, the Amen Corner, playing on the stage, and you've got people dancing in the audience. And Judy Huxtable, who was married to Peter Cook for a while, is in it as like a sort of raver at this club. And there's this Michael Gothard plays this incredibly handsome, cool guy on the dance floor. And so you've got this going on. So they're like sort of disco dating and mating stuff, and then they go off together. And then basically he kills her and then tries and drinks her blood. So you've got all these different things going on. The very opening of the film is a jogger running through London, and he's jogging, and you've got this amazing sort of jazz score going on. He collapses. He wakes up in a hospital room, pulls back the bed sheets, and he's had one of his legs amputated, and he starts screaming. And you also keep cutting back to him. Every time you cut back to him in the hospital, he's had another limb amputated.
Oh, no.
And so all this stuff is going on, and it's like you're a good half hour before any of it starts to dovetail together. And like I say, you've also got Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, and Peter Cushing. So honestly, if you like 60s, 70s horror, this is like a gem that a lot of people haven't covered. And it's highly recommended. You cannot predict where it's going. The ending is phenomenal. So yeah, Scream and Scream Again. Check it out.
The shocking thing is that there were joggers in 1969. That's the shocking thing.
I remember watching it. I remember thinking, oh yeah, I read about it in Radio Times. I'm thinking, oh yeah, this is on tonight. It's got all those horror icons, and it starts with a guy jogging across the park. Going, hang on, this is not what I was expecting.
No, definitely not. Okay, your number 3 then, please.
Okay, so this, I'll be shocked if you've not seen this one. So David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, again from 2000.
Yeah, that's just a classic. Yeah. Absolute classic.
I probably won't surprise you to know I'm a big fan of David Lynch's work. Not all of it, but I think even his lesser works are really interesting. But I think a film like Mulholland Drive is right up there, and I think because it had this interesting gestation and this very sort of odd, truncated route to being a feature film that was originally a pilot for a TV series. Was it with NBC? I can't remember now. And then they started being RC, and then they pulled out. And so he got funding from Canal Plus in France to shoot some more stuff to turn it into a feature film. And it's just, I think it really is a masterwork. I think he gets so much play out of every aspect of this. I think the score, as you would expect, is fabulous. I think the performance from Naomi Watts as this sort of ingenue, very optimistic. I think it's a great performance. I think it's dark, it's funny. You don't quite know where. I think Justin Theroux, I think his performance is excellent as well. And the idea that it's a sort of like you're turning over the stone of sort of LA show business, and this is all the horrible stuff that's beneath it. But it's, again, like I say, it's got that dream logic, so nothing quite fits together. And it, I think it does if you want it to. And I think there's multiple interpretations. And I think it was all a dream, isn't it? But I think it's really open to interpretation. And I think. I think we're a bit too hooked up on meaning, and I think meaning isn't the be all and end all. And I think atmosphere can trump meaning. I think beauty can trump meaning. It's like I'm a huge fan of modern and contemporary art. Not everybody, but I spend a lot of time looking at art and with art. And I think it's one of the most deadening questions when people will be looking at a piece of like abstract or surreal art, and they'll say, "Well, what does it mean?" And I think, but you wouldn't say that about a painting of a landscape or a painting of a vase of flowers. You just think, well, is it good or not? How does it touch me? And I think the same rules can apply. We don't have to understand or decode everything. I think sometimes decoding stuff actually crushes the bloom a little bit. And I love the fact that Mulholland Drive is just so open to interpretation, because it's a great ride. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I've watched it, I think, 7 times, since it came out. When it first came out, I went to see it 3 times in a row at the cinema across a month. And and every time I just got more out of it. I do think, I'd almost say, it's the ideal starting point for Lynch, because there's something, everything else he does, there's something of it in that. You've got shades of Blue Velvet, Eraserhead, Twin Peaks. It's all sort of in there, but it's the best of it, I think. I mean, I love a lot of his films, but I do think that for me, that's the true masterpiece.
Do you think the thing with David Lynch is that he makes the movies? So you ask the question of what's it about, and it may not, like you say, it may not necessarily be about something, but a David Lynch movie, a bit like a Kubrick movie, it's almost set up so that there are things hidden in there when there may not be, but people will look for that, and they'll specifically look for things like that in a David Lynch movie, that there's meaning in every shot. Yeah,
I think. Have you seen the film? The name escapes me at the moment, but it's the film. Is it called Room 307?
Room 237 or something like that?
Yes, that's it, yeah.
Yes,
and
which is fascinating.
It is a fascinating film. And there's a point in that where one of the commentators is talking about all the layers that he thinks could potentially be in there. And he says something along the lines of, you might think I'm reading too much into this, and how could anybody have the intelligence or bother to put this much detail and this many hidden things in a film? And he said, don't forget, with Kubrick, you're dealing, and I can't remember the number because I've got dyscalculia, numbers escape me, but he says, don't forget, with Lynch, you're dealing with somebody of an IQ of, and however it was, and I just thought, that must be a high IQ then. Yeah. But I think that's it, and I think similarly with Lynch, there's I can't remember the name of the guy who did it, but on YouTube, somebody has done like a 3-hour examination of Twin Peaks: The Return.
Oh, really?
And there's so many things, and you look at that. My son Misha is a big Lynch fan, and he's watched it all. And he was saying some of the theories in there. You just think, okay, well, it might just be random that these things have come out. But Lynch is incredibly intelligent. Was incredibly intelligent. You know that he's got this quirky sort of or shucks surface to him, but he's clearly a very, very deep thinker, to put it broadly. And so I think there is a lot of stuff in there that's to be discovered if you want to. But I think it's that thing. Any artwork has got layers, whether the artist wants it to or not. The stuff that we put in that we expect everybody to get, the stuff, and I do this myself, the stuff you think, well, only a few people will get this. And also the people that don't get it won't know they're not getting it. It'll just pass them by, in the way that little kids watching The Simpsons are laughing at certain gags but not getting some of the references to 70s films or whatever.
Exactly.
But it doesn't matter. They're enjoying it on one level.
Exactly.
So you've got those levels. And then also, and I know this from my own work, and I know this from talking to other writers and artists, the stuff that after a while, when you've got a body of work there, you think, God, I always put those kind of things in, don't I? There's these echoes of that, and that I did there. That's an echo of that, or that's that inverted. And so all that's going on as well, and it doesn't, some people might listen to me saying this and thinking, just enjoy it, just sit back and enjoy it. And I think, if you want to, just sit back and enjoy it.
Exactly.
I'm not saying my level of overthinking and sit and diving down, and I'm obviously not the only person that does it. I'm not saying that's the correct way to do it, but that's a way to do it. But equally, you can just sit back and think, this film is a head fuck, and just enjoy it on that level. I would not judge anybody for that. I think, but that is one of the marks of a true, genius, I think. And we're talking about Kubrick. I mean, you can watch The Shining and just enjoy it as a Stephen King well-paced shocker, or you can start, looking below the surface, looking at the symbolism, looking at the hidden stuff. They're both valid and they're both fun.
I agree, absolutely, and it's a great documentary. That is the Room 237. I find it fascinating that. And I would love it to be the fact that he has placed like all of those cereal packets in a certain way, that he's everything that's in his view on the screen is exactly where he wants it. Nothing's there by accident. And I love that. I love the fact, whether it's bullshit, whether it's real, I don't know.
Well, I think, it's like, he notoriously didn't rush things, did he?
No.
So it's like,
taking loads of takes.
So he's got, and I know from a friend of mine that went and looked around the Kubrick archive, and they were allowed to open, a couple of boxes. And she opened a couple of boxes, and it was just photographs of doorways.
Really?
And it was for Eyes Wide Shut. And he'd either himself or more likely some assistants had gone out and shot photographs of doorways around a certain area of New York. And there was 2 boxes about this deep, just of that, for him to go through and go, maybe that one, it's like, he had the time and he had the brain power, so why wouldn't he?
Yeah, I heard on a podcast only yesterday they were talking about the stack of paper that's is it whatever it is? What's typed on the paper about makes Jack a dull boy?
Oh yes,
line. That he got one secretary to write out all 500 pages. To type it out, and even though you only see the top bit, you only see the top one, and she also had to write it out in French, German, for whatever movie, country it was going to go on, and that's the attention to detail. I love that.
Yeah,
but it's also crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, but it's also giving yourself options, and like as a director, he's sort of thinking, right, well, the scene as it stands, she's going to, pick it up and read the top 2 or 3 and that, but he doesn't, maybe he wants the play to be able to sort of think, right, I've just had this idea, maybe we fan them all out across the floor.
Exactly.
We'll never know. But I mean, I think sometimes it's giving yourself that flexibility.
That's a great point. Okay, then your number 2.
So my number 2 is a film from 1975 called Mirror, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky, a Russian film. So he is. I don't know, Solaris I don't know if Solaris was his best known film, perhaps. Stalker is the one that people refer to, which is probably my least favourite of his films. But Stalker is incredible. It's a sci-fi film. It's incredibly slow moving. And if people want to take the piss out of Tarkovsky, they'll refer to Stalker because it's a very slow, ponderous movie, albeit a beautiful one. He did Solaris, which is another sci-fi thing, which was described when it was released as the Russian answer to 2001. It's a beautiful film. It was remade by Steven Soderbergh in a very different form years later, but that's a phenomenal film. His films are sort of always right with all kinds of questions about humanity, about relationships, about mortality, and so. Mirror is his most personal film, and the phrase that you quite often hear used, about art house films is it's a cine poem. And I think it's a very easy thing for people to say it's, about from their silly poems, because it sort of says, well, it's a bit sort of abstract and, it's not going to, it's a sort of poem. Mirror really is a poem. It's a mixture of very personal memories and also the memories of the Russian nation. So there's some newsreel footages intercut with it as well. This is another film that makes me cry, no matter how many times I see it. I think it is the most visually beautiful film I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of films since I've seen Mirror, and nothing's come close. It says a lot about childhood. It says a lot about human relationships, about selfishness, about how we reframe ourselves depending on who we're with. The cinematography is phenomenal. A little bit like Lindsay Anderson's If, you've got scenes that are in sepia, some that are in black and white, some that are in colour. Tarkovsky is another person, like Kubrick, who spent an inordinate amount of time assembling things, getting props together. But I think he is one of the most visual filmmakers. I seem to remember a quote where Bergman talked about first seeing Tarkovsky's films and just saying, this is a genius. And I think all his films are really worth watching. If you only watch one, I'd say Mirror is the one. It's sort of painterly as well, the way he uses light and so on. Again, some of it's quite surreal. There's some incredibly beautiful images in it that are very moving, but you couldn't quite pin why. There's a scene where he's talking about his mother, and it cuts to this shot, and they're in this sort of crumbling apartment, and she's in bed, but she's actually floating about 5 foot above the bed with a bed sheet hanging off her, while this beautiful music's playing. And there's so many beautiful and arresting images. And again, it's one you can watch and rewatch. I read that there was originally another editing of it that had another 40 minutes. And one of the great pities of my life is the fact I'll never be able to see that. Apparently, it was reordered in the edit. This running sequence reordered multiple times. I think it was like 20 odd times, because it's a story that sort of could be told in any order almost, apart from the last few scenes. And it's also got a lot to say about creativity and how we sort of, as humans, need creativity, we need beauty, we need enigma. So yeah, it will not be to everybody's tastes, but it is very touching and very beautiful.
Oh. Before we reveal your number one, what do you think is the state of cinema today in regards to its blockbuster movies, its sequels, its reboots? What do you think of the state of cinema?
It feels like it's more polarized than it's ever been. I think there is fewer films occupying, in terms of budget, there's fewer films occupying the middle ground. There's a small but steady clutch of blockbuster or would-be blockbusters. All the Marvel, DC superhero stuff, which doesn't interest me. Even as a kid, I was never interested in Batman, Spider-Man. It's not for me. If it's your thing, fine. I don't judge anybody for that. It just doesn't do it for me. But I think that is a big chunk of like the top end. And also, obviously, there's films, Tom Cruise films, Mission Impossible, there's these big sort of ongoing franchises. And then there's not very much at all in the middle ground. And I think, films that cost, I think you've got these multi-million-dollar films, and then you've got films that cost between 2 and 8 million. And then in between, not too much.
No.
But I think it's actually quite a healthy time for film. I think post-COVID, a lot of people thought, if I don't do this, I'll never do it. I think, people of all ages. So I think there's a real upsurge of scripts and production. I think it's a great time for horror films. I think there is also a trend for greater experimentation in the world of horror. And I think you see experimentation in horror in a way that you don't see as much in other genres. A film like, say, Stop Motion, I think, which obviously is not a mainstream horror, but it's got a decent budget, it's got a good cast, it's well put together, it's a really professional piece of work, did well at festivals and so on. I think that's that's indicative of the sort of stuff that you can see where there's I don't know, people are looking at different ways of storytelling in horror, and I think that's really interesting. And as we were saying earlier, you can do it on a relatively low budget. Have you seen Murder Rooms, Canadian horror film?
No, I haven't. I've heard of it, though. That's one that my co-host has mentioned, I'm sure.
Yeah, you see, that's another example of something that was quite sort of low budget, but phenomenal film. It is one of the most disturbing horror films I've seen in the last 10 years, and yet you do not see any gore. You don't see anything.
Really?
You don't see anything horrible. You get it described to you a lot, but in terms of tension, it's right up there. It's as tense as the best Hitchcocks.
Really?
In terms of character, it's really strong. In terms of sleight of hand, it's great. Where you think you're following the story one way and then it veers off in another way. There's a scene, it starts off, the first 10 minutes, you think you're going to be watching a courtroom drama. And there is a lot of courtroom stuff in it, but it's way beyond that. There's a scene towards about 2/3 of the way through in the courtroom. I won't even hint at what it is, but somebody turns up in the courtroom and they do this thing, and it is one of the most excruciating things I've ever had to sit through. Because it's not, again, it's nothing gross, it's nothing gory or anything like that. But that's one of the really clever things about this film, is it sort of sensitizes you about things you might not otherwise have felt sensitized about.
Really?
And and there was the scene that I'm referring to. I literally, and this never happens to me, I was literally watching like this, because it was like, I was thinking, no, don't do that, please don't do it. Don't let this be what I think it's going to be. Oh, it fucking is. Yeah, honestly, it's Murder Rooms. And I was really impressed as well, on a music geek level, that on the soundtrack you get to hear a little bit of music by Ada Rook, who I really like, who is a Canadian trans noise artist who's brilliant. And you hear a little bit of somebody's playing one of those while they're doing a workout. I just thought, great.
Right.
No, it's very smart storytelling, beautiful performances, really, really gripping, and very unpredictable as well.
So when you get something like that, and then you go to the complete other regions, you have something like is it the Terrifier? Have you seen those movies?
No, I know what
Art the Clown, which is, I watched the first one, and it was like, that's just gross. It's just built. Yeah,
I know of them. I've not.
Yeah,
I think I hate to say it, I think I'm probably a bit too old for those.
Yeah, I think because does it feel then? It always feels to me that's just a get out to stop the good writing. Is just, let's just cut someone in half, or let's just do.
I know,
a bit of a bluff.
Well, I think again, I think film, music, comedy. You can have all the opinions and all the prejudices you want, but I think in the end, if it does the job it's set out to do, then so what? And I think there is a big audience who love to see, all those sort of Hostel, all those sort of, they're not for me, but there's a big market for those films. And I'm not saying market forces should always prevail, but I think, there is something going on there that people really want. And I think, those films they don't do it for me. I've seen bits or trailers that are not for me, but there is a market for them. But another filmmaker I've been really impressed with is Brandon Cronenberg, David Cronenberg's son. He's done 3 features. The first one, Antiviral, is good. It's a really good film. Possessor, his second film, is excellent. I'd say it's like a 9 out of 10 film for me, that. And then his third film, Infinity Pool, utterly gripping, brilliant performances. You don't know where it's going. Very Ballardian sort of storytelling, similar to some of J.G. Ballard's latter stories about gated communities and so on. Mia Goth's in it. So I think his films are excellent. Also, we should get to my number one film in a minute.
Yes, absolutely.
But a week before last, I went to see The Shrouds, the new Cronenberg film, and I thought it was excellent. I thought it was powerful and really moving, and it felt like it drew on a lot of his best sort of tropes from like mid-period, with a little bit of Dead Ringers about it, and a little bit of Crash. But yeah, I was really impressed, and I think his daughter also did a film, didn't she? But I've not seen that either.
Oh, right, okay. Well, you just mentioned it, and I think you mentioned it earlier on. But Graham, what is your number one movie?
This has been my number one film for as long as I've been able to say what my number one film is. It's Oh Lucky Man from 1973, directed by Lindsay Anderson and written by David Sherwin, starring Malcolm McDowell. It's 3 hours and I think 1 minute long. It's a picaresque journey. It's social satire. It's a musical. It's a Brechtian film, so you've got a cast of a large cast, but a lot of the main actors will play at least three different characters. Arthur Lowe plays three different characters. Graham Crowden does. Basically, Malcolm McDowell is a coffee salesman. He's traveling around the country trying to sell coffee, and it's about his journey and the different people he meets. But it's a satire of every strata of society, from the ultra rich, the military, the porn industry, the old boy network, the sort of in the industrial decline of the UK. It's all in there. Mark E. Smith of The Fall, who I was fortunate enough to know and work with for several years, it was one of his favourite films. And I remember he said to me once, if you want to know what Britain was like in 1973, watch Oh Lucky Man. And I think that's a really astute observation, actually, because it does take you all around the country and all around the different. It's a bit like something like Voltaire. It is a picaresque journey. The soundtrack is the score is by Alan Price, and again, it's Brechtian, because rather than having the music just in the background, you see him and his band playing the songs in a rehearsal space. So it's like a sort of song of whatever's happening in the narrative. It's like he's doing the song of that. And then about just under halfway through, Malcolm McDowell's character actually meets the band, and then the band become part of the story for a while before they peel off. It's got a couple of really shocking horror sequences in it. It's very, very funny. It's got quite a few surreal interludes in it. It will probably never, ever be shown on TV again now. And it's, I don't want to use the phrase cancelled, because I think that gets overused and it's not true. But Arthur Lowe, one of the three characters that Arthur Lowe, who's best known for playing Captain Mannering, obviously, on Dad's Army, one of the three characters he plays, a character called Dr. Munda, is based on a sort of Idi Amin type character, and he's in blackface. He's basically
really?
He's got blackface, but having said that, and I'm not just saying this because it's my favourite film, there's not a hint of caricature about it. No. He's doing a proper performance as a believable South African dictator. It's not cartoonish. And I think, again, it's part of the sort of Brechtian sort of style that they were going for. Of course, now through a contemporary lens, if you sort of think, well, why didn't they get a black actor to play that part? Well, fair point, but that wasn't what they were going for. No. And they're not. It's not taking the piss out of, oh look, he's blacked up. It's performance. It works within the film, but through contemporary eyes, I think. Like I say, it probably won't ever get shown on TV again for that reason. And I was involved in an event at a art gallery recently with the artist Jamie Holman, contemporary British artist, and he wanted to screen one of his favourite films, and we do a Q&A and talk about it. And we ended up showing Albert Finney's film Charlie Bubbles, which is a great, I think a brilliant film, actually, and a really underrated film. He stars in it. It was written by Sheila Delaney. He directed it. And it's phenomenal. But he wanted to show Lucky Man. And the gallery was saying, perhaps not. And they're going, it's a bit too long. It's a bit too long. He's going, that's not the reason, is it? That's not the reason. Is it not available to stream anywhere? Maybe it's available on DVD. Right. It might be available to stream somewhere. I'm sure it will be, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked on that, because that's a small point, but it's got a lot to say. And I think David Sherwin is a phenomenal writer. And I remember reading an article where Sherwin was talking about going to a memorial service for Lindsay Anderson, and Anderson had directed The Sporting Life, If, and Oh Lucky Man, which is Britannia Hospital was the third in the trilogy after If and Oh Lucky Man. And he said, when somebody mentioned that the scripts for the films were written by me, David Sherwin, he goes, "Oh, there's a few gasps and mutters." He goes, "I realised people just thought Lindsay Anderson had done it all himself." And I think it is sometimes a lot of the writer to be pushed into the shadows a little bit. But David Sherwin is a phenomenal writer. Britannia Hospital, the third part of the trilogy, Malcolm McDowell plays the same character across all three films. He does a phenomenal bit of sleight of hand in the storytelling in Britannia Hospital, where Malcolm McDowell is the hero, and we've, for your hardcore fans who'd even you followed him as a young boy in If, or a teenager, then in Lucky Man, the sort of rites of passage, and then in later life is in Britannia Hospital. Then he gets killed off about halfway through the film. He gets killed off, and you think, hang on, I thought it was his film. Then he brings him back as part of this sort of Frankenstein type monster in the film. And I just think I'm struggling to think of another writer that would do something as audacious as that. And there are some really audacious bits of storytelling in O Lucky Man, and it's a very, very political film, but it's not from any political perspective. So it's not a right-wing film. It's not a left-wing film. It's basically it's critical of everybody. And that's one thing that I don't know if it was, I don't know how conscious it was early on, but I think it's something that I picked up and use in my work is just, I always think, just be even-handed. So if you're going to take the piss out of everybody.
Yes.
And that's like ideal. It's like part of what it's about is subcultures. And alternative cultures, and underground cultures and gang cultures and that. And I try and sort of look at them all with the same degree of affection and the same degree of scorn, and that allows you to take it all as once.
Yeah, it's refreshing to have that kind of attitude, because normally there is something that is left leaning or right leaning, and you get bogged down in that a little bit, don't you? And it's nice to have it straight down the middle. And
also, you end up preaching to the converted. You end up just like you're not convince anybody new. I mean, I'm a big fan of the artists Gilbert and George, and their art can be quite contentious. And in an interview once, George said, "Our artist brings the liberal out of the fascist and the fascist out of the liberal." And I think that's a really interesting angle on it. Just think, right, you put the information out there, and then people pick through it and see what they want. Throbbing Gristle, another example of sort of quite sort of indigestible band in some respects, because they're dealing with stuff that you don't necessarily put in the form of entertainment, but they're doing it in a sort of research and development kind of way. They're just putting it out there and saying, look at all this. Some of it can be beautiful, some of it can be horrific. So that appeals to me. That appeals to me generally, and I think it really appeals to me in O Lucky Man because it's done with a very light touch. And at this point in his career, Malcolm McDowell could have done anything. He was one of the hottest properties, and he chose to do this, which was partly he and Sherwin started writing it together. It was partly about Malcolm McDowell's early experiences when he was a young man working as a coffee salesman, and then Sherwin developed it into this sort of picaresque sort of fantasia. So it's got. I think it's very funny. It's very funny. Graham Crowden, who's one of my all-time favourite actors, has got 3 roles in this, which are all beautifully done. But yeah, it's great. He's got as much. He's as critical of the homeless as he is of the super rich. Nobody comes out of it unscathed, and yet it's also quite an optimistic film as well. So really unusual. It sometimes gets compared to Preston Sturges' Sullivan's Travels, and there is something of that about it, but it's weirder and bleaker than Sullivan's Travels.
There you go. Well, that's your top 10. Pretty painless, really. Although there was some tears in there. There were some tears. Graham, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
A real pleasure, man. Thank you.
Good luck with everything with the tour. I hope it goes really, really well. And I'm going to try my best to get down October the 1st to the Strange Sober Rooms and hopefully get to see you. So it's going to be so much fun. I'm going to carry on listening to the rest of the seasons of Ideal.
Oh, your audio adventure. Brilliant.
My audio adventure. So for everybody else, obviously all the information is there. I will put the link in the show notes. So if you want tickets to go and see Ideal, just click on the link and click through to whichever venue you want to go and see. I thoroughly recommend it. Graham, once again, mate, it's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Carl. I've really enjoyed it.
Good luck with everything. And thanks everyone for listening and watching. Bye.
Cheers, man. Bye.